I'm Kim Eddleston with FamilyBusiness.org. Today, we're going to talk about a sensitive topic for many family businesses, the importance of formalization and including more non-family professionals in the business. And in doing this, being able to maintain the family's quality assurance of products and the family's legacy. For this discussion, I have the perfect person, Mr. Matt Nielsen, third generation of Nielsen-Massey, who is managing director of Nielsen-Massey Vanillas International Europe. Nielsen-Massey is a family business founded in 1907. It is world renowned for its fine quality vanilla and food flavorings, and many of you likely have a bottle of their flavorings right in your kitchen cupboards. I know I have several. We're going to be discussing the governance journey of Matt Nielsen's business, which went from being family dominant to creating a board of majority independent directors in 2016 and appointing their first non-family CEO in 2017. Thank you for joining me, Matt.
Well, thank you, Kimberly. It's a pleasure to be here and to be able to share our story. Thanks for the opportunity.
So after more than 100 years of operations, what made your family want to create a board with a majority of independent, non-family directors?
As you mentioned, we were very family dominant before that. The board was made up of family shareholders, and there were only four of us. So we chose to bring in an independent board for two reasons, honestly. The first reason was we still have and had big expectations and aspirations to grow our business, to continue to grow our business and develop it. We knew that we wanted outside expertise to do that. We wanted professionals who had been there and done that had grown businesses before, both family businesses and non-family businesses, so just other privately held businesses. The other component to it was very much tied to our family. And family dynamics. By the time we actually pulled the trigger, there were three shareholders that owned the business, but were also active in the business. And so that and its siblings. So it's my brother, my sister, and I that own the business together now. And there's obviously family dynamics in that, right? With having siblings work together. And we were using a model that was kind of co-chiefs, right? So we all were responsible for the business together. We were kind of the co-CEOs of the business. We had different areas of the business that we operated in, right? But it was the three of us. And, often as it is with siblings or any kind of a decision-making trio, right? You often, when you have topics that come up, too often there would be two of us that would feel one way about it, and the other person might feel a different way about it. And majority rules when you're kind of making a decision or taking a vote to move forward. And often then that led the one person that maybe didn't agree with it or think of it differently felt like they weren't being heard or listened to or considered, right? So it really caused conflicts among our family unit between the siblings. So we knew by bringing in independent directors that could help us with these conversations and utilize their experience and provide direction to the business, that it would help alleviate some of that decision making among just the three of us, which then, as a result, would improve the family relationships, which it completely has.
Nice. Usually there's conflict in creating one of these boards. Did you experience any resistance at first in creating the board, which could have been seen as limiting the family's voice and control?
Yeah, there was definitely a lot of resistance. When we first broached the idea of doing an independent board of directors, meaning us, the third generation, our mother was still chair of the board and was still the majority shareholder as it related to all the voting stock. So clearly nothing could be done without her agreement, right? Because she controlled everything. And she was very resistant to doing an independent board. She basically just said every time we brought it up, she'd say no. Even with that, once we did buy her out, and it was the third generation that now owned the company, it was still a 2-year process for us to get through as we were to educate ourselves on the value of an independent board to make sure that we really were aligned on why we wanted it, as well as then did we want an advisory board or a fiduciary board? And so that took a tremendous amount of time, and we weren't all aligned on why we wanted a board and whether we wanted an advisory board or fiduciary board. So it literally took us, as I said, that 2-year period of conversations and education and more conversations, right? Before we all finally came to the point and said, okay, yes, we want to do this. We want to do it with a majority of independent directors. And we want to make it a fiduciary board. We want it to have real kind of meat and teeth to it, as opposed to just an advisory board, which is pretty unique in family business to do that.
So it sounds like your board definitely helped manage conflict a bit better. How else has it contributed to the growth and success of Nielsen-Massey?
As we've evolved our business and going from being this small family business to family members and non-family members wearing multiple hats, there was one point where I ran operations and retail sales. But to be able to professionalize that and to recognize that we don't want people to carry all that weight, right, and have all that responsibility. And they helped us see that, right, and then helped us kind of frame what kind of expertise do we want to bring into the business to really kind of kickstart our growth, which is what our overall plan was. So just having people with finance background and, CPG background and consumer goods and marketing background and all those kinds of things to help us look at things in a different way than we may have traditionally looked at them is just, it's invaluable experience and expertise to have.
So given your experience, what advice do you have for family businesses that are resisting creating more formalized boards that include these independent directors?
Any leader needs to continue to educate themselves. There's always new things to learn, right? So this is no different than that. So do your education about what it means to have a board of directors. And that can be formal, right? Like you can go to a program, an exec ed program, and study about family business boards or corporate boards, right? But you also certainly have a network of people, of other family business leaders that I'm sure people have met through events and things like that, right? And find those that do have independent directors on their board and talk to them and just hear from them why they did it and how it's going. And I would venture to guess that 99% of the people you talk to that have independent directors on a board will say it was the best decision I ever made. I have very rarely ever heard anybody say that they made a mistake by having independent directors. And usually the mistake wasn't necessarily having independent directors, but it was a mistake in who they selected to be their independent directors, right? So that was more of the issue because they either didn't have a good profile of what they were looking for, or they thought independent was their accountant or their lawyer because they were non-family. They truly need to be independent from outside of the business for them to have really a fresh set of eyes to come in and look at the business and see kind of the things that maybe we're not seeing because we're so embedded in the day-to-day, right? We're so used to being executives in the business. We're so used to fighting the daily fires that to kind of get ourselves up to a higher level, to think more strategically is so hard for us to do. We also worked with a family business consultant who helped us through that process also.
You explained really well how your board is helping the business side. I know some boards are really instrumental in preparing the next generation and succession planning. Can you envision that, or have you thought about that, or was it an issue when you were picking who would come on board?
So it wasn't so much of an issue when we were picking who was coming on the board, though part of our profiles was we wanted experience in family business. The other piece of it is then like, how do you interact between shareholders and board and family and shareholders and board, right? Like all those different hats that we wear as family business owners. They also understand that and help, give direction on things. We haven't taken the next step then of how we're educating the next generation. It's actually something we're working on right now. We're having our first older G4 will start sitting in on board meetings, obviously as a non-voting member, but just to observe the board meeting, understand how the board works and things like that as well. And so that'll be part of that education process that we'll go through, and the board will certainly help with that.
Do you have any advice on ensuring that the board meetings are really successful and that a family business is really utilizing all this expertise from an independent board?
First and foremost, you need to decide, do you want the chair of the board to be a family member or a non-family member? If it's going to be a family member, then best practices is you have an independent director who kind of acts as the lead independent director, so that there's, again, an independent leader on the board that can engage perhaps with the other independent directors in a way that maybe the family chair wouldn't be able to engage with them. We happen to go with a non-family chair, again, because of those dynamics of decisions and all that. We wanted to have an independent chair that kind of ran the board, that had experience as a chair also. And then, so after you decide that, then you work on kind of what your agenda is going to be, right? And making sure that you have a formal agenda for the meeting. In your first quarter board meeting, you might talk about sales and what's the sales plan for the year, right? To be able to hit your budget number at the end of the year. And then second quarter might be marketing, where you do a deep dive into marketing. So what's marketing going to do to support the sales plan to be able to hit the number at the end of the year, right? And then the third quarter might be a strategic review, right? Like, what are we doing about our strategy? What is the strategy? What's going on in the world now that might alter our strategy, right? And how do we rethink that? And then fourth quarter is going to be, final approval of kind of what is the annual operating plan and budget for that next year. So kind of having a standard kind of list of topics to talk about throughout the year can be really important and help keep everybody on track. And then ultimately, you got to make sure that the directors you bring on are on the board for the right reason, and that they're there to share their expertise. And they need to be a cultural fit to the board. You got to make sure, like, people have to be able to get along, right? Because ultimately you're going to have a bunch of alphas, right? You're going to have a bunch of strong leaders, most likely. Not every leader is a good, teammate. So to have that, that kind of team structure of making sure everybody respects each other and is listening to each other, and that you can have constructive conversations and you can disagree on things, and that's okay. Right? As long as everybody feels like they're being heard and considered and respected. That's truly important.
Thank you, Matt. This was amazing advice that you shared on your governance journey and creating an independent board of directors. Again, this is Kim Eddleston with familybusiness.org, speaking with Matt Nielsen, Managing Director of Nielsen-Massey Vanillas, International Europe. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Kimberly. Appreciate it.